Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you especially given how it's flu season here in New York, and Caterina's not.
Yeah, I've actually been reanimated in order to come here. I'm on more medication than Elvis in his late shows, so it's good to be able to make it, and hopefully, like, the energy from the audience will be animating me as well.
That's great. So we've got the bot here. I really appreciate you coming out. So I wanted to start with this idea of the theme of the conference, because again, Flickr and now Hunch so closely associated with the concepts of Web 2, and specifically what we're calling out this year, the power of less. And there's so many ways in which the work that you've done expresses this. You want to talk about one or two of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the significant things when we were building Flickr was that we had no money, we had no cash. We had started our company Ludicorp to build a game, and the game ultimately failed. It didn't work out, and we ran out of money. And we were really running on fumes at the time when we came up with the idea of Flickr. And so you talk about resource constrained. We didn't have any money. We had about 3 months of gas left in the tank. We had none of us had been taking salary for 6 months to a year. The only guy that was getting paid was the one who had 3 kids, and so it was really starvation times, really. Flickr, I'd say like 90% of the features that you see on Flickr were actually built with a team of 6 people. We were based up in Vancouver. We were very highly under-resourced, but I really do believe, and have always believed, that constraints are really the thing that kind of makes you more creative. And so we had to come up with interesting ways of getting the word out about Flickr. And so we did a lot of things which like people see everywhere now. Things like it seemed kind of counterintuitive at the time to be able to post your photos on your blog or on other parts of the web. I think it was seen as contrary, like, bandwidths and storage costs were prohibitive at the time, but that was kind of like rapidly declining, and so it was possible for us to do these things like, put your photo on another website, which now you see kind of everywhere, and basically open up the membrane, made this permeable membrane of Flickr, so that all of the photographs and things that were distributed all over the web were, these are kind of like the things that are, kind of part and parcel of all Web 2.0 sites. And so, given those constraints, we, came up with all of these novel ways of, kind of recruiting people into the company. We thought up all of these kind of stunts for us to get, put up on Boing Boing. We had all of these methods for getting the word out about our product, which, we may not have done if we had enough money to hire a proper VP of marketing and, we're taking real salaries. There's other things about the site as well. If you look at the design, at the time it was seen as a very minimalist design. Right. And if you look, there's actually somebody did screenshots from the very early versions of Flickr. And if you look, it's kind of a evolution of taking things away. Right. And you'll see that, while Flickr itself is a fairly complex product and it has a lot of functionality and there's a lot of things that you can do with it, we very deliberately made the design that the functionality was somewhat recessed. So it seemed like a very simple, there's a photograph in the middle of a page, but if you look more closely, there's like these, there's like this little, fringe of, functionality at the top or on the sidebar that you can, release all of the functionality and features of it. So.
Yeah, that was my first impression of Flickr. I mean, years ago. Yeah. If you're used to a site like Snapfish that's pushing a lot of options forward, they want you to do a lot of stuff. It comes off as very minimal, but the power of that means that that's where all my photos are now. So.
Well, we tried to simplify things as much as possible. If you looked at things like the community guidelines, so the community guidelines. So yeah. One of the things that Jen actually mentioned earlier that she loved about the community guidelines is that, there were these kind of simple ideas. It was 2 or 3 short paragraphs about how do you behave well on a website. And one of the things that it says there is like, the creepy guy that's kind of bugging people on these social networking sites, don't be that guy, right? And like it's kind of it's a very simple and kind of easily understood idea of how a community is ought to work. And don't put offensive or obscene material up there. We said, this is another favorite phrase of mine from the community guidelines: remember the children.
Right.
So these kind of ideas, you can get things across. On Hunch, our guidelines have, we have like the requisite legalese in our terms of service, but we have like an English language translation alongside of it to try to make these things understandable and simple and easy to use.
Yeah, those 4 words say so much more to me than all of the paragraphs about what would be good or what would be bad.
So likewise, we do have a very small team on Hunch as well. We've got 10 people. We run the operation in an extremely capital efficient way. We don't have a lot of we don't have a fancy office or anything like that. And most of our expenses are really in terms of people's salaries and just getting work done. And I think that you can accomplish a great deal with a very small team. Very small team.
Right. So you did that at Flickr, and then you grew the business, became very successful. Then you were bought by Yahoo. Talk a little bit about when that less becomes more in terms of staff and resources and expectations. You've done a lot to try to maintain that culture, whether you're in a big organization or a small organization. How does it work in a larger organization?
Yeah. So. We were acquired. I think by the time we were acquired by Yahoo, we were 10 people or 11 people, and we moved from Vancouver, where we were based, down to Sunnyvale, and we were, absorbed into a 10,000-person company. And so this was, a bit of a culture shock. We weren't accustomed to working in such a large organization. And so, one of the things that, was very clear to me was that it was, there's no innovation deficit at large companies, and there's tons of great ideas, and there's tons of great products that are, struggling to see the light of day inside of large companies. And it seemed to me that one of the things that I was kind of given as a task when I got to Yahoo was Jeff Weiner, who was SVP in the group in which I was working at the time, said to me,
keynoted the first Web 2.0 Expo.
Exactly. He keynoted the first Web 2.0 Expo, and he's actually the CEO now of LinkedIn, another great Web 2.0 company. He said, Caterina, we would really like to build the next Flickr inside of Yahoo. And I said, Jeff, it's not going to happen, and here's the reasons why. Because there's just too much. There's too much infrastructure. You have too many resources. You have so many talented people, and there's all of these different organizations within the company that are fighting for resources. And he said, well, you need to figure out a way to streamline the process so that we can actually create products like this. So we created a kind of an incubatory kind of thing inside of Yahoo, which is called Brickhouse. Mm-hmm. And really what it was a rapid development environment for new products. It had been an outgrowth of the Hack Yahoo program, which had been run out of the technology development group there. And Hack Yahoo, most people probably are familiar with hack programs. Yeah. But basically the way it works is, we started at noon. We said you can hack on, any engineer, or, you don't need to be an engineer, a marketing person, a designer, whatever, can build anything that they want, not having to do with their product, necessarily if they want to, or with any other person on the team, and build something in 24 hours and then demo it at the end of the day. Right. And so it's a very kind of quick and dirty development process, which bears incredible fruit. Amazing things have come out of this, and so. What we found was all of these really interesting, innovative new ideas were kind of emerging, but they didn't have a place to go. Right. And so we needed to create an environment in which these products could see the light of day. And so, I think that the basic principles are the same. The basic principles inside a big company are the same outside of a company. You need to be agile. You need to kind of get kind of obstacles out of the way. You need to kind of fund things quickly. You need to be able to take risks. You need to be able to allow, experiments to fail. Mm-hmm. And you need to, allow things to grow for a sufficiently long time to see whether or not they bear fruit. A lot of times what I see in big companies is that they don't have the stamina to see a new project through because, a startup, it often takes, 5 to 7 sometimes longer, 10 years, Tell Me, which was mentioned earlier, like really kind of, right. Blossomed in 10 years. And so you need to have that kind of like the long view on these things and, allow the team to kind of continue and iterate continuously on products. But it really, the basic principles apply, small teams, right. Rapid development, all of that stuff inside a big company as well.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about that spirit of experimentation and agility with Hunch. But before we get to that, we're here in New York. Hunch is based in New York. You obviously still spend a lot of time on the West Coast. When we brought this event here, we spent a fair amount of time trying to think about what's different about the New York community versus Silicon Valley. And I think you have a unique perspective on that. You're seeing a lot of startups here in New York. What are you seeing?
Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, I also do angel investing too. So one of the first companies that I invested in is based in New York is Etsy, and Etsy has been a huge success story. It's seeing upwards of 125, 135 million in revenue this year, and it started out with your typical story, like bunch of kids in a garage. I mean, they weren't literally in a garage, but they were in their dorm rooms. They were all NYU students, and it was very clear that this was going to be. It was very clear to me that this was going to be a big company. They had all of the ingredients of a successful business, from what I could tell. It was very participatory. It had a very strong community. It had a lot of enthusiastic users. They had found a parade and gotten in front of it. They had really kind of found a great niche. For people who are not familiar with Etsy, Etsy is a marketplace for handmade goods. It's spelled ETSY. It's a great company. Since it's nearing Christmas season, you might want to check it out because it's handmade things from all over the world.
You can do an all Etsy Christmas. That's just what I do.
Yeah, exactly. And there was something about it that was very kind of Brooklyn, very New York. It had a kind of a very indie flavor. And I'm seeing tons of companies coming out of New York too. We've got 2020 by 200, which is a site by Jen Beckman, which is an art site. There is Kickstarter, which is a very creative site about funding. It's kind of like A&R for the masses, kind of DIY, Web 2.0 style funding of all these kinds of interesting projects and artists, and you can fund an album that somebody's producing, or a book of poetry, or a novel, or all kinds of things, art projects. And that's another great company. Foursquare is seeing a lot of action. Meetup is a good kind of stable New York startup that we love. There's tons of stuff going on here. So I'm actually very, very excited about that. There's also, I think, a lot of new funding mechanisms, a lot of seed funds that are coming out of New York. I think that another thing that's happening in New York is that, with the financial meltdown, a lot of the computer science talent was being sucked into the finance industry, and with its collapse, there's a concomitant rise in people that are actually going into startups. So you see MIT graduates who come to New York, will no longer be working for hedge funds, but will actually be starting up new companies. So that's also a great.
So you're going to suck all of them into art startups.
Yes.
So there is a theme. Yes. You're investing in the art community and Etsy and Kickstarter, all these creative, really deeply creative ventures, but you're investing them through investing in companies that you're going to build. So.
Yeah, I mean, my background is I don't have a typical CS background. My background is I was an English major who studied art. I went to Parsons for a while. I actually went to New York schools. I went to Parsons, I went to NYU, and then I went to Vassar, where I eventually graduated. And I was an English major, and it was not clear from the get-go that I was going to go into technology. And in fact, I recently was profiled in the Alumni Monthly, and all of my English professors wrote me, and they're like, "What the hell happened? This is not what we expected you would do." But I do think that one of my core beliefs is that creativity really emerges from disparate elements coming together, different schools of thought, exposing yourself to different ideas that are coming from different places, and you don't find a better place than New York for those things to come together. I think that sometimes out in the Valley, I love San Francisco, and I owe much of my career to being in Silicon Valley, but I do think that often there can be a bit of a kind of a bubble, a little bit of a enclosed way of thinking there that it's good to kind of get out and kind of look around and see other things that are going on.
So that's the special sauce, is New York's culture and its
absolutely.
perspectives. Yeah.
There's also a lot of obviously this is a media town, and so there's a lot of media. There's a very strong arts community.
Right.
things like that. So I do think it's a good petri dish of all kinds of ideas.
So I want to get to Hunch, but first, really quickly, is this a good time to start a startup, to start a company?
Absolutely. No, I think it's a great time to start a company.
Just for the record.
Yes. So I wrote a post a couple years ago about, and this was, I think 2006 maybe, and I was just seeing so many Me Too companies, and very much in the Valley. I was just kind of, there are all of these events going on, and I don't want to. Be too negative about. But it just seemed as if there were just so many companies that were coming out that were kind of rehashing of the same ideas, and people weren't really doing things that were novel or adventuresome or innovative or new and taking really any risks. And so, and there was like too much money. It was like all of these things that I kind of dislike. Too much money. Not enough, creativity, and so I saw this as being a kind of a bad time to do a startup. But times have changed. Yeah. Times have changed, and so things are, everybody's tightening their belts. You need to be more creative. There's not as much money flowing into the system. I think it's a great time. It's opportunity, of a lifetime. I mean, we started Flickr in 2002, which, if you remember, was like. Yeah. That was the end times. Everyone's like, oh, consumer internet is dead. We were all like, proclaiming its death. And, the vintage, if you look at the companies that started in like 2002, 2003, and 2004, I remember watching Reid Hoffman, who was an investor in Flickr, but, in Facebook and Dig and Friendster and, any kind of, Web 2.0 company worth its salt. And, someone asked him, said, what's your secret for, investing in, Web 2.0 companies? He's like, well, I invested in 2002, 2000. No one else was. I mean,
timing.
And so I actually really think that, this vintage, 2009, 2010 is going to be a great vintage. I think this is a great vintage. It's a great time to start a company. There's a lot of talent out there, and the environment is incredibly rich.
Right.
Because I think that, to kind of lead into some of the other ideas that we're talking about and why we started Hunch, I think that greatest company to come out of the internet, bar none, is Google, right? And what did Google do? Google was a company that figured something out that was genius. They figured out that there's all of this human-added data all over the web, right? There were links that were added by human beings to other pages. They realized that there was like clickstream data, like people clicking on things, and that this was just like a ripe opportunity to be able to find and deliver the best information to people that they needed. And so what we've done with Web 2.0 is we have expanded the amount of data that is out there now. Exponentially. It's just a tremendous amount of data that's out there. We've got real-time data. We've got location data. We've got demographic data. We've got location data. We've got so much information that's out there, that's being put out there, that's kind of the byproduct of all of these social interactions that are happening on Web 2.0. And I really do think that the future of the internet really belongs to whomsoever can take all of that rich data that's being kind of poured out all over the world, and give it back to people in a useful way. If you can make something valuable for people, then you can.
So let's put the Hunch slides up. I want people to see Hunch, since it's such a good lead up for that. And I want you to just explain to people what it is.
Okay, so Hunch, in sum, is a way that helps you make decisions. Is this what's on the screen right now? This right here. Hunch helps you make decisions and get smarter the more you use it. So basically what it does is Hunch asks you a series of questions, and then it gives you an answer. And so what you will see, if you go to a topic on Hunch, I'm going to advance one more, is, here's an example. Which computer game should I play? And then it will ask you a series of questions, and then it will give you an answer. World of Go. I think this is what I got.
And is it usually right?
On mine. And I'm going to, so basically what it does, and it can be any question. So you're looking for a hotel in Dallas, or you want to figure out what college you should go to. You need to buy a grill. You need to, you want to figure out what's the latest New York Times bestseller that I would be interested in, anything that you can think of. And it will ask you a series of questions, and it will basically replicate like an expert system. So a good example of that is you're trying to figure out where you want to go to college. So typically what you would do is you would go to your college guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor would ask you a series of questions. They would say, do you want to participate in sports? Do you want to go to a big state school? Do you want to go to a small private college? What's your GPA? Do you want to attend school in the Northeast or the Southwest or what have you? And then they would kind of give you a selection of here's the potential schools that you should apply to. Mm-hmm. So basically, what we're doing is we're creating decision trees, mm-hmm. and the entire site is user generated. The entire site we started with 500 questions that we had seeded the site with, and now we have 6,000, something like that, and there are all kinds of things. And it'll take, much like Wikipedia, mm-hmm. It will take some time to build up the full corpus of Hunch's questions. Wait, let's go back.
Back one slide, please.
Can we go back?
There you go.
There we go. And I'm going to go back one more, and one more. And one more. 2 more. I want to go, because one of the things that's interesting, one more back, please. And so there is, if you look right here, what Hunch does also is it tailors all of its answers to you. So you'll see that this is the start page. It says, where is your home located? And it says, in the suburbs, in the country, or in a major city. And it'll ask you a whole slew of questions. And hopefully this is fun. And it turns out that most people are kind of find it hard to tear themselves away from it. It asks all these kinds of questions. Alien abductions, are they real or fake? Are you more likely to drive a Vespa or a Harley? Would you rather spoon or be spooned? And all these kinds of questions. And it will go, there's actually thousands and thousands of questions. I figured out that it probably takes approximately 8 to 9 hours for people to get to the end, and 500 people have gotten all the way to the end, and
really?
Answered all the questions. The average number of questions that people answer is 140.
Do you get a prize if you get all the way to the end?
And so what happens is, and so basically it will figure out over time what you're like, who you are. And the thing about it is that it can then figure things out what book you would read, and what book you would be interested in reading, and what movies you'd be interested in watching, and what grill you'd be tending to buy, and which hotel mm-hmm. you would prefer in Dallas. And so it gives you an answer, and the reason we say that it gets smarter the more you use it is because it will give you a different answer than it would give someone else. And so we found that, there's certain things that are very taste-oriented, right? Mm-hmm. What band I listen to is very taste-oriented, and what grill I buy is actually not very taste-oriented, right. Or what camera I buy is not very taste-oriented. So I was some, punk rock chick in, Harvard Square, and I was some, suburban dad in, Michigan. We could both have the same camera and be very happy with it, and it wouldn't be taste-oriented at all, but they're going to listen to very different music. And so we apply this sort of taste information to the results that you get and give you responses that are tailored to you. So hopefully the ultimate goal of Hunch is that it becomes this super awesome magic 8-ball that just kind of it says, Jen, you mm-hmm. are Jen. Here's the new movie that's coming out, or here's what you should get for your mom for mm-hmm. her birthday, and just be able to tailor it just to you.
But I have to tell it more and more about me to get to that point. And so one of the things,
not really. There's actually we found that you can actually answer. We can get to a 90% success rate. We call a success rate, where mm-hmm. you're satisfied with the answer. People mm-hmm. are happy with the top 3 answers that we give, with only 20 to 30 questions.
So I've answered far more than
that.
Now, you've also, because now you're not just finding out about this one person, but you're aggregating, you're analyzing this data, and you're finding out some interesting things.
Yes. Okay, so there's recently an article that was published in Huffington Post, which said, birthers, people who believe that, Obama was not born in the U.S., have all these kind of specific characteristics, such as they don't vote very often, and they're less likely to have a passport or leave the country. We find all kinds of interesting correlations in the data that you wouldn't expect. So a great example of this is cufflinks. So people who have worn cufflinks. I noticed that Tim O'Reilly was actually wearing cufflinks earlier.
Yes, beautiful cufflinks.
And
that means about him.
And so, the thing about people who have worn cufflinks recently within the past 2 months is that they're more likely to have been thrown out of a bar for rowdy behavior. They're they're more likely to claim that 3 or more people have been named after them. I mean, there's all these kinds of really interesting, funny correlations that you'll find in the data that you would not necessarily expect.
So
I mean,
to
it's
watch
really,
Tim tonight.
It's kind of very, yeah. Watch him at the bar later.
And
you know, like, I mean, it's really kind of amazing. Some of it is like as you would expect. Some of it is very typical. You know, people who think that, you know, Rush Limbaugh speaks to their, you know, very strongly to their point of view, have very conservative views, and, you know, liberals the same. I mean, it's like there's some stuff that you would kind of expect, but there's other things that are like wildly fascinating.
Yes.
So.
We don't have much time left. I mean, there's one question I wanted to ask. I mean, I can see how Hunch is sort of a natural evolution of what you've, of where you would go, having sort of been there at the beginning and then seen this sort of enormous explosion in data and wanting to take advantage of that. You're so strongly associated with Web 2.0. Other than that, what do you see as sort of the next phase of Web 2.0? Where is this going?
My interest in Web 2.0 is primarily social. My background is in social software and in online communities, and you know, in fact, I got my start out in, it was very old school, you know, the Well, and with like Howard Rheingold, who is really, you know, he's really the kind of crown prince of online community stuff, and you know, I really think that the most interesting things about the internet have been when groups of people get together and collaborate on, you know, these kind of massive projects, whether they know they are or not. I really think that the most important things about Web 2.0, you know, and, you know, now that we're in kind of like, you know, late stage Web 2.0, are that every single user is a contributor. Everything, like kind of everything that they do, I mean, you know, the clickstream data that I was talking about earlier, and, you know, contributing to systems. And I think designing systems where the user's smallest action becomes meaningful. You know, on Wikipedia, you can edit a topic. You know, can just you know, kind of just pop in, change a spelling error, and then kind of pop out again. And that the system over time evolves and it changes and it becomes, you know, increasingly valuable of all of those actions, you know, millions of actions that small in the aggregate. And so designing systems that do that, that are able to capture these tiny little, you know, these tiny little actions. I mean, I think that you look at something like Wikipedia and it's like, you know, a very successful, you know, collective knowledge system. And then you look at something, and, you know, I was kind of singing the praises of Google earlier. One place in which they have not succeeded is, you know, with a lot of their social software, because they didn't understand this principle. So an example of that is Knoll, right? So Knoll Knolls are these kind of pages that a single person edits, and like you have to have you know, a great deal of knowledge about a topic, and you have to, you know, kind of write a long, you know, kind of essay about, you know, whatever topic it is that you're contributing to. Whereas Wikipedia, you know, it starts out like, you know, like sometime back in like, you know, 2001, somebody said gazelle. A gazelle is an animal. And somebody else said like a gazelle is a mammal that lives in Africa. And then like, you know, it's just like, and then like it kind of gradually expanded from there. So like these systems that like tiny bits of contribution, you know, combine to create this, you know, kind of like big magical, you know, kind of, you know, platform in the aggregate are like, you know, what we should try to do in, you know, this late stage Web 2.0.
Great, yeah. And then Hunch can ask us about it.
Exactly.
Well, I wish we had a lot more time. We're running out. But thank you so much, Caterina, for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.